Welcome Celeste Lawson to our teaching and learning session today. This is Associate Professor Celeste Lawson, and she is President of Academic Board, so we are very, very, very privileged to have her talk to us. And she's going to talk about being reflective. So over to you, Celeste, and don't forget to record Lydia.
Thanks so much, Julie, and hello to everybody. Now, the topic that I was given is being reflective, and the instructions that I have are just talk about being reflective. So that's helpful. Thanks, Julie. So what I thought I might do is just chat in general, but really, if you've got any questions, or if I say something that is interesting or flags something for you, just either butt in and say something, or post a question to the chat, because I think it'll probably be a lot more beneficial if this was interactive. And so I'll start by talking, but if you've got any questions, I've got the chat open so I can see the chat, and if you just post to the chat or butt in and say hello. So hello to those people who've just joined us. Julie's just welcomed me, and I'm just about to start talking about being reflective. But I thought what I might do is just explain the role of Academic Board. I have recently taken over as Chair of Academic Board. I took over in April of this year. And I have a confession, and I have to be careful about how I frame that confession, because this is actually being recorded, and I don't want to appear too silly. But when I took over as Chair of Academic Board, I just asked, can we all just mute? Would that be okay if we just check that we've muted? Someone is... Oh, that's better. Thank you. So when I took over as Chair of Academic Board, I did so with some naivety and enthusiasm, and I guess that was tempered a little bit by a complete lack of knowledge, really, of what Academic Board was supposed to do and what it was all about. And so I figure if I'm Chair of Academic Board and I don't really understand what Academic Board is doing, then I'm going to guess that there are plenty of other people at the university who also have heard of Academic Board but probably don't really understand what it is. So I thought I'd just quickly start by what is Academic Board, and that actually leads into the reflection part of it. So I'll get on to the reflection. So Academic Board is a university-wide committee. It is answerable to council. So the University Council is the committee that Hi, Kate. I can hear you speaking. Thank you. So Academic Board is answerable to Council. Council is the largest committee of the university, the highest ranking committee of the university, and they are the oversight body of the entire university. And they are the ones that keep us running as a university. But what Academic Board does is has oversight of the academic side of the university. So Academic Board is responsible for looking at the quality of the qualifications that we offer to make sure that they align with the appropriate legislations and policies that we have at the university, to make sure that what we are teaching is actually something that we can call a degree or a unit or an assessment, and that responsibility is with Academic Board. Now, it sounds very simplistic, but actually the role is quite important, and it's legislated through TEXA. So TEXA is the governing body of the higher education sector, and they are the ones who look at the university to make sure the university is actually a university. And because our university is what's called a self-accrediting institution, that means we get to say if a qualification satisfies certain requirements, we can call it a bachelor. If we have that power, and that power rests with Academic Board. So it's quite an important committee. And the Academic Board itself has a series of subcommittees, which I'm sure you will have all heard of. Education Committee is one that you've probably had most experience with. Learning and Teaching Committee, Appeals Committee. There are several subcommittees that Research Committee, Research Higher Degrees Committee, all of those answer into academic board, so that academic board provides that oversight of the running of the academic side of the university. And academic board is probably the committee that is most responsible for causing headaches for academics, because we are the ones who require academics to do things and jump through certain hoops, and often it's very unpleasant for the academic, and I'm still a teaching academic myself, so I share that pain, and it is a requirement which I didn't really understand when I first took over the role, at why we had to be so strict about it. And the reason is because we are a self-accrediting institution. We do have to make sure that our quality is upheld, so that we can maintain that self-accreditation and be able to say that what we are teaching is good enough to be taught, and that as a result, our students, once they graduate, can actually say that they have a Bachelor of whatever, Bachelor of Social Work, Bachelor of Nursing. And so the role of academic board then is that oversight, that high level. So into that environment I pop in April, and it's somewhat surprising to me that academic board also can be quite strategic, because it really, at first glance, seems like it's very compliance driven, very governance driven, and there is an element of that, but there's also that level of strategy that we can engage with at academic board on behalf of the university. Now I'm getting into the reflective part of it, and so the strategic way that we can run our academic board can then filter down into the academics at the grassroots, and I still classify myself down at that level, so that what we do is going to produce well-rounded, well-grounded students who are employable and going off to do the things that we, that they want to go off and do and be part of. That strategic level of academic board is a very interesting place to be, and it is, many of you, I recognise quite a few names, may have heard of the Scholarship of Teaching conference that we're having next week. So the Scholarship of Teaching conference, it was intended to be an academic board driven conference to promote teaching scholarship. And that is that when academics, and here I am getting to the reflection bit, where academics are teaching, often there's this nexus that's overlooked between teaching and research, or there's a focus on research and the teaching academics think, oh, what can I do, and that we are reflective of our own teaching practices is what we call scholarship. And that scholarship is measurable through outputs such as a conference like this that can actually count as research. So there's a deliberate link there from an academic board level to be more strategic in the way that we think about teaching and the way that we think about our scholarship of teaching, so that we can reflect on what it is that we do well at the university and what it is that we can learn from each other. So there is, if anyone is participating in the conference, you'll have seen the program, and it is mind-blowing the amount of stuff that we are doing at this university. It is incredible to think that there is so much happening, and yet as individual academics we are all so individually busy that we just don't have time to even think about what everyone else is doing, let alone reflect on our own practice. And so part of this conference, the intention of this conference, is to force that reflection. It's to force people to take a step back, think about what you're doing and what you're doing well, and to share that practice with other people. And that sharing of practice is scholarship, but the engaging with other people is the reflection. So being able to say, this is what I'm doing this job, and I'm teaching it in this way, in this context, and being able to share that with people to say, So other people can say, well, actually, I'm doing that too in a slightly different way, but wow, I could learn from your lessons. And that level of reflection is really the motivation behind having a conference like this that is across the university. A lot of schools have done something similar, but actually what we're finding, and if you've read the program, you'll see that a lot of the presentations that are being shared are actually cross-disciplinary and can be, hopefully, fingers crossed, when we see the presentations, will be applicable between schools. And that in itself is amazing too. And that being able to share that practice and reflect on our own practice, and I'm looking forward to it. So it's actually quite fortuitous, Julie, that you invited me, and Lydia, that you invited me to this session, because I get to flog this conference and say, if you haven't heard about it or if you're not coming, please come. Yes, Lydia, I am looking at you. Because it is actually well worthwhile. And the other part of the benefit of this conference, it's completely virtual, so it's all online. We'll be recording each of the sessions. It's free, and you'll be able to, if you can't make it, still be able to access some of the sessions that are interesting to you and be able to see what other people are doing. The benefit of participating in real time, of course, is that you get to ask questions, because once the session is recorded and posted, there's no opportunity for feedback. So I still would encourage people to come during the times. The program, if you go onto StaffNet, onto the academic board page on StaffNet, the program is available there. So, does anyone have any questions so far? And I can talk about being reflective, that's not a problem, but any questions, anyone brave enough to post something into chat? Anyone want to say anything? Give me something to talk about.
I've got a question.
People. Yay! Okay.
Yay!
And then I saw Glow's hand go up. So I'll go to you, Lydia.
Okay. So what about reflecting on things when they don't go well? How do you approach that?
Do you know what? I think that is an amazingly good question. And not everything goes according to plan. And it is how we deal with that actually is indicative of our resilience into the sector, and how we learn from it. Someone once said to me, there's a difference between fail safe and safe fail. And when you think about that, you sort of think, yeah, okay, I kind of understand that. And what that means is not everything is going to work. And if we live in an environment where we just go for the fail safe all the time and never take any risks, we'll never learn, we'll never grow. So rather than saying, oh my goodness, it didn't work, what a disaster, we can say, oh my goodness, it didn't work, but wow, what a lesson I've learnt from it. And so rather than thinking the worst of a failure, we can reflect on how we would do things differently the next time and then not make that same mistake again. And in fact, some of the presentations next week are on how things didn't work. And that's very brave for these people to stand up and say, do you know what, I stuffed up completely, but now I'm doing it this way. And had I not stuffed up, I probably wouldn't have grown in that direction. So that in itself is a huge learning curve too. So I wouldn't say if it doesn't work, that's not worth sharing. Quite the contrary. I'd say if it doesn't work, then tell us all about it so that we don't fall into the same trap. Glow.
Celeste, if I could respond firstly to Lydia, I agree with you. I have a unit that the students are really happy with, but interestingly, I wasn't happy with it. So I've introduced some stuff, which leads me on to the second point of busyness that you mentioned. I'm incredibly busy, and I find I reflect on something very briefly, but I'm trying to finish my PhD, and you know, the challenges of being able to implement something that's effective and be sane at the end of the day.
I think actually that's a valid point, but you're probably not going to really like my answer. and my response to this. So we are all busy, and part of the game and is for someone to explain the rules of the game. And the rules of the game are that it's not fair. That in order to progress and to do well as an academic, we have to do. I've got to be careful about how I say it, because my own personal opinion is probably not necessarily the most professional one. The rules of the game is, if we want to progress as an academic, we probably have to work that little bit harder than what everyone else is doing. And the irony of that, of course, is that those who work the hardest don't have time to reflect or to tell people about what they're doing because they're too busy doing it. So there's a balance there that we have to find between sharing our practice and just being really, really good and no one ever knowing about it. And finding that balance is the trick. And so whilst we are all busy, and certainly the better academics are more busy than the lazier academics, and I think that's not a secret, in order to improve ourselves, we have to provide that level of sharing of our practice to others. And the reflection is two-way. It is us reflecting on our own practice, but it's also us sharing that practice to others. And let me just put it this way. I don't know what academic level many of you are on, but in order to get a promotion, often a key flag for getting that promotion is how well you have engaged with scholarship. Now, one of the ways, scholarship is it's a nebulous term, but one of the ways that you can prove scholarship is through sharing of practice, because by sharing your practice, you are showing that you are reflecting on your practice, because you can't share without reflecting in it yourself. So if you want to get a promotion, one of the elements of promotion is scholarship of learning and teaching. That's one of the elements. In order to show that, you need to be able to show that you have shared your practice. Now, whether it's sharing as in research of your own scholarship, that's one thing, but it could be sharing of practice such as participating in a forum just like this and being able to say, I put my hand up in that forum and I contributed in this way and I got feedback like that. And that little tiny anecdote doesn't count for anything anywhere else except in that scholarship. That is scholarship. What we are doing here now today is scholarship. And if anyone is happy to share their story and for someone else to say, thank you, I got something out of that, we can then put that, you can stick that on your promotion application and say, this is how I shared scholarship. So Glo, what you are doing now, and that question that you are asking me now, is actually the sharing of scholarship. So well done.
Celeste, can I make a few comments? Firstly, Peter Munn here. Basically, one of the things I'd say first to the person who just asked the question was, I think actually doing a PhD is a time when you are very reflective. You have to be. There is no way you can actually finish a PhD without taking a lot of thought and really pushing yourself to be reflective. The other side of that is that it's simply not good enough sometimes to work hard, because in an academic, you can work exceptionally hard. And I remember being a head of program for Uni SA and social work. And I walked out the door at the end of one of the years and thought, God, I've worked really hard this year. So much administration stuff to do and et cetera, et cetera. And I stopped. And I realised I'd not presented at a conference. I'd had no peer-reviewed articles. I had no small research grants. And I thought, yeah, I've done all that and I've actually gone backwards in my academic career. Just some comments.
Actually, that's really insightful, Peter, and I think that is exactly what we are saying here now. And it actually marries quite well with what Glo was saying, and that we are all very, very busy, but it means nothing if you haven't shared it. No one else knows how busy you've been. Yep. And no one else, to be frank, no one else cares. We're all caught in our own little bubble, but the only way people can start engaging with your scholarship is if you share it.
Yeah.
We have to find the time.
And if we, you know, one of the things that really saddens me is when people finish a PhD and then don't publish from it. It is such a waste because, again, you know, what you're saying, you know, that research is not shared and therefore no one is then getting any benefit from it, and neither is the staff member who went through all the trouble of actually doing that PhD.
I totally agree with you. It is a balance, and we have to find that balance. And it's easy to get caught up in the pressure of doing more and taking on more. And usually the academics who are high achievers are always the ones who say, yeah, all right, I'll do it, because no one else will. But at some point we have to say, you know what? My own scholarship has got to come first. It's got to come first, otherwise we don't progress. Julie, I can see you have a question there. So Julie Shaw, sorry. Julie.
Oh, which Julie? Sorry.
It's really hard because there's a Julie Shaw and there's a Julie Bradshaw. You've got to say it very quickly. So Julie Shaw had her hand up first, Julie, and then I'll come back to you.
I was just going to comment on busyness and particularly with scholarship and in trying to improve what I was teaching. Often these are yearly courses, and that by the time it came around again to update the course and to improve on it from what you'd done the previous year, you'd often forgotten what you needed to improve until you were halfway through teaching. So what I ended up doing was actually noting whenever there was something that I thought needed to be improved, what the problem was and how I could improve it. So when I came round the following time, I actually had some recall of what was happening, because busyness means your mind's flooded with so much information and it's hard to recall until you're sort of going through the process again.
I agree with that. And actually, I don't know how many of you are unit coordinators, but when we do our annual unit enhancement report, I get in trouble every year. So here I am, I'm telling you something that I get in trouble for. And every year it's because I don't do my annual unit enhancement report in the term that it's done. I know, naughty me. And it's because we meet as a course at the end of the year and we discuss all of our units, what went well, what didn't go well, as a course. And so in terms of reflection, we get to reflect as a course rather than as an individual unit coordinator. And golly gosh, that's helpful, because just like you said, Julie, if we've done something and it didn't work and we've got our colleagues saying, well, of course it didn't work. How silly are you? You could have done this. Or, oh, gee, that happened to me and I did it that way. Then we get so much more benefit out of it than completing an annual unit enhancement report in isolation. So I actually agree with what you just said. Julie Bradshaw, did you want to say something?
I was going to make a comment because I've been involved in so many admin jobs over the years, but it's very easy. It's a very nice little comfort zone when you're busy. You tick off little things and you feel confident that you've actually achieved. But to actually engage in scholarship, you need to move outside that comfort zone and become uncomfortable. It's not so easy to tick off things then. And I think that's just something I was just reflecting on as we were talking, and what I find that I get satisfaction from ticking off those little boxes and getting things done. And sometimes it's a little bit harder to move outside that, into that uncomfortable zone.
Thanks, Julie. Now, Rob, did I see your hand up before? You were waving at me, or?
I'm one of these very unfortunate nurses that is working in a course where, reflection is the be-all and end-all of nursing. We're supposed to be able, innate reflectors on our practice. Unfortunately, I'm an extrovert, so I'm a think, do sort of person. So interpersonal reflection's quite difficult for me. And then you layer on top of a job whereby you've got layers and layers of busy work and all these balls going around in your head. And reflection, because it's a process and not necessarily an outcome, but I do understand that it has some wonderful outcomes, you can get some very reluctant people on board, such as myself. Do you have any tips on how to be good reflectors? Because I do read a little bit of literature it doesn't resound very well for me. I'm just wondering about yourself. I understand you would have a very, very busy position, and we've talked about this issue of busyness. How do you get over it? Get into it?
I think that's a really good question, and I'm actually not sure that there's an easy answer for it at all. And in terms, well, do you know what? Let me put it this way: for a long time, who was it? I don't know. Was it? I can't even remember. One of you just said before that we are so busy that we don't have time to reflect. We don't do anything. We just move on to the next task. The other part of it for me was that it was very uncomfortable for me to reflect on my own performance. And that was because I knew I was doing a good job, but I didn't want to admit it, because that's really arrogant. How arrogant of me to think that I'm doing a good job. I can't blow my own trumpet. That's just there's no. And it wasn't until I got over that that I realized that actually it's not just for me. The reflection is not just for me, because the reflection is part of the scholarship, which is the sharing of practice. It was actually part of me growing as an individual. That was the bonus. But I almost felt a sense of obligation. That might be too strong a word, but obligation to explain what I was doing to other people, because I knew that I was doing a good job, and I could see that other people were not. And whilst the result was that I had to stand up and say, yeah, okay, look at what I'm doing, and that was uncomfortable for me, at the end of the day, it helped others, and that was more comfortable for me. The fact that I was helping other people made it easier for me to rationalize me standing up there blowing my own horn. But that was also, no one ever told me that that's actually the rules. That's the rules of the game. And so that's me now telling you, passing on that experience to say that's the rules of the game. The rules are you've got to stand up, and you've got to be proud, and you've got to say, I did it this way, and this is why, not to blow your own trumpet, but to be part of scholarship, and so that other people can learn from it. And that's the rule. And it wasn't until I realized that, because no one tells you, it wasn't until I realized that actually I got my first promotion. And that was an eye-opening moment for me, because until then I was very uncomfortable standing up and saying, yeah, look at me, look at me, look at me, because that's not, it may come as some surprise to people, but that's not really who I am. Yeah, I got the pink hair and all, but it was something that was actually quite uncomfortable to be. The perception was that I was being judged, and it's not that way. It is the opposite of that. It is people who are always still in their own bubble, looking at what you're doing, but reflecting on their own bubble. They're not looking at what you're doing and reflecting on you. They're looking at what you're doing and looking to apply it for themselves. So it's not about blowing your own trumpet. It's about sharing your practice. And when I made that flip in my head, it was a lot easier.
Sorry, Celeste, can I come in here? I hope I'm not jumping in.
Go for it, Andrew. Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, I came in a bit late too, so let me know if I'm kind of going over any old ground. But I just think that the reflection thing for me, and I teach my students this too, because I'm involved in teaching practice in domestic and family violence practice. To think about reflection as a habit of mind, and I just what made me think of this, what Rob said really about it's a process. It's not just a series of events. And I say to my students, because they kind of say, well, we should be doing research on what works in domestic and family violence, that kind of stuff. But I'm saying you're doing research all the time. You're researching your own practice. So you're reflecting on your practice. It's a habit of mind, and I'm quite compelled by Kolb's idea of this kind of reflection that you theorize upon, you turn into an action plan, and then you put it back into your practice again. And I think we can all get in that as a habit of mind. And so in terms of sharing that kind of thing, I think we can all be learning. We all have practice wisdom built, or teaching wisdom built up as we go along. I don't think it's something necessary that we should get too upset about and say, well, I haven't done this, because we should be doing it, like I say, as a matter of practice, as a habit, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense completely, Andrew. And actually what springs to mind when you say that is the way that we as a university measure scholarship, because scholarship is reflection, right? But at the moment, when we use the word scholarship, people jump to the conclusion that it's something that's a research paper or that's been published, or there's something about our own, the way that we've researched our own practice so that we've written a paper, it's gone to some journal somewhere. But scholarship, I think we are not defining scholarship well enough. And I think that scholarship is actually exactly what you're saying about that personal reflection, but the discussion that goes with that, when you are having that discussion with your students, and your students come back and ask that question, that is still scholarship. That's
it's a matter of making it mindful, I think, of being conscious of it and as a habit.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. And that doesn't lessen the fact that it's scholarship, and it doesn't lessen the fact that it's reflection. I just don't think we are yet as a university articulating the notion of scholarship well enough. I agree with you.
Okay, thanks.
We're going to actually have to tie it up here. We've already done 30 minutes.
But Andrew Kennedy's just waving. So,
Andrew, go for it, Andrew. Sorry, look, we can keep going. That's not a problem.
I was really ambivalent. We're out of time. It's fine.
No, please, Andrew, talk.
Okay, I just wanted to share over what the last Andrew said, because I've moved from a clinical practice to an academic practice just recently. And when Rob was talking about balls in the air, I was thinking of spinning plates is my analogy. And the mindfulness was really important, because the first thing I had to do was identify, because I'm so busy suddenly, so busy from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, is separate what's urgent from what's important. Because what's urgent is the stuff that's about to fall, but what's important may be the stuff you should be reflecting on. So that mindfulness process of sitting down and taking a moment to identify what's important rather than what's urgent, then sort of led me into the reflective process. Just sharing.
I think that's really insightful, Andrew. Thank you for that. I totally agree. And we've got to learn to recognise the priorities in that.
Okay.
We might have to finish, Celeste. Look, this has been great. It's been really, I've loved you sharing your insights in a very round and, I don't know, segmenting what type of way. And I do hope you come and talk to us again. Is there any other comments people want to make before we close up today?
Thanks, Celeste. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Celeste.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much, Celeste. And thank you everybody for coming and joining in. It's made it really successful session for everybody. And I guess it's allowed me to look at reflection in a different way. I hadn't thought of reflection as equals sharing your practice. And often when I do PRPDs with somebody, we talk about scholarship, and I'm never actually quite sure how to actually define scholarship. So it's given me a tool to actually use when I'm working with other people. So thank you, Celeste, and thank you so much, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week when we have... I
think it might be Jason.
Jason talking about from the top level down why we need to reflect. Okay, so thank you. Goodbye. Thanks again, Celeste.